Case 1. Tasha Bates, 2012, Bradley County, Tennessee. A small patch of hills and two-lane roads where neighbors wave from porches and summer heat hums through the air. Tasha Bates lived there with her two little boys, Rockland 3 and Leland 5. People knew her from the grocery store, from church, from the playground. She looked tired sometimes, but kind. Just another young mother trying to keep life together. No one thought tragedy would stop on her driveway. It was June 27th, 2012. By mid-morning, the sun was already burning down on the cars parked outside her apartment. Tasha buckled Rockland and Leland into the back seat of her Chevy Malibu. Neighbors saw her walk back inside for a moment, expecting her to return. She never did. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 3. Inside that sealed car, the temperature climbed past 120 degrees. And the boys cried for her at first. Then the sound faded into the thick air. When a neighbor finally looked through the window, they weren't moving. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but there was nothing left to save. Both children had died of hypothermia. At first, investigators treated it as a heartbreaking accident. Hot car deaths happen every year. People forget. But something in this case didn't fit. Tasha's timeline shifted every time she told it. Her phone record showed long gaps, hours when she was home doing chores, calling friends. She hadn't forgotten. She'd walked away knowing they were still inside. When officers questioned her again, she broke down and admitted she left them so she could have a break. No alcohol, no drugs, just exhaustion, selfishness, and a choice she couldn't undo. The coroner's report confirmed the horror. The boys had been alive for hours in that heat, their tiny hands scraping at the straps that held them. Detectives stopped calling it neglect. They called it murder. In court, the jury listened as medical experts described what happens to a body in a closed car under Tennessee sun. How air thickens, organs fail, and consciousness fades slowly. Each detail pressed the room into silence. When the verdict came, it was firm. Guilty of 2 counts of felony murder and aggravated child neglect. The judge handed down consecutive life sentences. There would be no early release, no new beginning behind another door. Neighbors who once waved to her stood outside the courthouse, holding pictures of Rockland and Leland, 2 boys with matching smiles and toy cars in their hands. The community never forgot the sight of that vehicle under the burning sky. For them, the memory is a scar that heat can still awaken every summer. Some said Tasha lost her mind that day. Others said she lost her heart long before. Either way, 2 small lives ended calling for the only person who could have saved them. It's easy to picture evil as a stranger in the dark. Here it wore a mother's face in daylight. She didn't just forget her children, she left them, turning the family car into their coffin. Tasha Bates will spend the rest of her life behind bars. But the story doesn't end there. Because for every person who saw that tragedy unfold, a single question remains. How could love turn into absence so complete? Sometimes the greatest danger to a child isn't outside the home. It's silence from the seat in front of them. Case 2. Lindsey Lowe, 2011-2024, Manchester, Tennessee. A quiet place of church steeples, brick schools, and Friday night lights. In 2011, 25-year-old Lindsey Lowe still lived with her parents in the same house she'd grown up in. She worked as a dental assistant, smiled easily, kept to herself. Friends described her as gentle, maybe shy. No one ever thought of her as someone capable of harm. But inside that same house where she'd eaten family dinners and said grace before bed, she was hiding a secret that was already months old. Lindsey was pregnant. She never told a soul. She wore loose clothes, avoided doctors, and smiled through the small lies that kept her secret safe. She feared her father's anger, feared gossip, feared shame more than anything else. That fear grew quietly, day after day, until the night it took everything. It was September 12th, 2011. Her parents were asleep upstairs. In the small bathroom across the hall, labor started. No hospital, no nurse, no help, just Lindsey, a towel, and the sound of her own breathing. Sometime around 10 o'clock, her first baby arrived. A boy. He cried once, a tiny gasp of life. Lindsey panicked, afraid the sound would wake her parents. She covered his mouth and nose until the crying stopped. Less than an hour later, another wave of pain, another birth, another son. Alive, gasping, searching for air. And again, the same terrible choice. 2 small lives ended before dawn. Afterward, Lindsey cleaned the floor, wrapped the newborns in towels, and placed them in a laundry basket beside her bed. Then she went upstairs and lay down, silent while her parents slept a few steps away. For 2 days, the house kept the secret. Then her mother noticed a smell she couldn't explain. When she lifted the blankets, the truth came out. Her scream brought the neighbors running. Police arrived within minutes. Detectives who'd seen every kind of tragedy said later that this one still stayed with them. The stillness of that room, the way the 2 small faces looked identical, peaceful, untouched by the world that never had the chance to meet them. At first, Lindsey denied it. Then the questions kept coming, gentle but steady, until her story broke apart. She told officers she was terrified of what her father might say. She said she thought he would kill her if he knew she'd been pregnant. The confession left investigators silent. Fear may have driven her, but intention was clear. Both babies were full term, born healthy, and smothered within minutes. Her trial began in March 2013 in Sumner County. Reporters filled the benches. Her parents sat in the front row, faces buried in their hands. The case was simple and unbearable. The jury heard about the births, the evidence, and Lindsey's own words on tape. They needed only a few hours to decide. 2 counts of first-degree murder. 2 life sentences. She cried as the verdict was read. Her mother cried harder. A family broken twice, once by the act and again by justice. Years passed quietly. In 2024, headlines returned. A judge vacated her conviction after learning that one juror had written on a questionnaire that she believed Lindsey was guilty before the trial began. For the first time in over a decade, Lindsey walked free. She returned home, lived with her family, got a small job, tried to start over. But Tennessee's Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed the case again and reversed that ruling. They said the juror's opinion wasn't enough to void the verdict. The life sentence was reinstated. Within weeks, Lindsey was taken back into custody. She remains there now, waiting on new appeals that may never come. The Lowe case tore at the heart of a small town. Churchgoers who once saw her every Sunday now speak about her in quiet voices. For some, she's a reminder of what fear can do when left to grow alone. For others, she's a warning that secrecy can destroy a soul faster than sin ever could. 2 little boys never got names outside that courtroom. Their graves bear only dates. The people of Manchester still leave flowers every September, whispering the same line they whisper to all lost children, safe in his arms. Faith teaches forgiveness, but it also asks for truth. And in this story, both live side by side. A young woman who begged for mercy, and two sons whose cries never reach the ceiling of their own home. Case 3, Brandi Elliott, 2024, Hendersonville, Tennessee. A peaceful town by the lake where families walk dogs at dusk and parents wave from driveways. Brandi Elliott lived here with her 7-year-old daughter, Piper. Neighbors saw them everywhere. Grocery store lines, ice cream stands, Sunday afternoons on the Greenway. Piper was small for her age, bright eyes, freckles across her nose. Her mother called her "my sunshine." In July 2024, the sun was cruel. Brandi's husband, John, was in the hospital recovering from surgery, leaving her to juggle work, bills, and child care on her own. Friends said she looked tired, but never imagined how close she was to breaking. That Saturday afternoon, she told herself she just needed space. She grabbed her keys, walked toward the door. Piper followed, still in her sandals, saying, "Wait for me." Together they stepped into the light. The pair walked along Drake's Creek, a stretch of water locals loved for its calm. The trail curved through trees and ended at a shallow bank. No one else was nearby. Brandi knelt at the edge. Piper splashed her feet and laughed. Moments later, that laughter stopped. According to Brandi's later confession, she held her daughter under the water until there were no bubbles left. She told police she didn't know why she didn't stop. She said she just needed quiet. When she pulled Piper out, panic finally hit. She tried CPR, called for help. Paramedics rushed the child to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do. The doctors pronounced her dead at Tristar Hendersonville Medical Center. At first, the town mourned a drowning accident. Within a day, news broke that Brandi had confessed. The same woman who organized bake sales and volunteered at school had admitted to killing her only child. Detectives interviewed her for hours. Her answers never changed. She said she was overwhelmed and heard a voice telling her to end it. Investigators found no drugs, no alcohol, just exhaustion and despair. A week later, she was charged with first-degree murder. Her attorney requested a mental health evaluation. Records revealed she had struggled with postpartum depression years earlier. Whether that condition played a part in Piper's death is still being debated. The courts are waiting for the final report, but one thing remains certain. Piper's life is gone, and Brandi Elliott is in jail, awaiting trial. The community has turned grief into action. Volunteers now hold candlelight walks along Drake's Creek every summer to raise awareness about mental health support for parents. John Elliott, still recovering from his illness, attends every vigil. He carries a single sunflower, Piper's favorite flower. When he speaks, his voice breaks, but his message doesn't. If someone feels lost, ask for help before it's too late. People say the creek still runs quiet on July the 13th, the day Piper died. Fishermen who pass that spot lower their voices. They say the air feels different there, heavy with memory. And each year, when the morning light hits the water, a sunflower drifts downstream, placed by a father who will never stop missing his little girl. Faith offers comfort, but comfort never replaces. It only steadies the hands that light the next candle. For those who knew Piper, that's enough reason to keep believing that grace can still reach a broken heart. Case 4. Shanynthia Gardner, 2016. Memphis, Tennessee, July 1st, 2016. A call came into dispatch that morning from a neighbor near Hacks Cross Road. A boy, just 7 years old, was screaming that his mother had killed his brothers and sisters. Officers who responded that day would later say they had never seen anything like what waited behind that door. Inside a small apartment, the air was still. Children's toys lay scattered across the living room floor, a baby bottle on the counter, and then tragedy in every direction they looked. 4 young children, Talon, age 4, Saya, 3, Savvy, 2, and 5-month-old Yazi had all been stabbed to death. Only one child survived, the eldest, the same boy who had run for help. And that boy told police he watched it happen. He said his mother looked at him strangely and asked, "Am I a good mom?" Then she picked up a knife. Shanynthia Gardner was only 29. She'd once been described as quiet and protective of her children. Family members later told investigators she had been showing signs of paranoia for months, saying people were coming to hurt her and that the world was closing in. Her sister told the court that Shanynthia had stopped answering calls, kept the blinds drawn, and barely slept. Something had snapped long before that July morning. The boy's story matched the evidence. Police found the knife still on the floor. Blood trailed through the apartment, ending at the bathroom door where Shanynthia had locked herself before officers arrived. When they pulled her out, she was dazed, but calm. Her clothes stained, her eyes vacant. She said nothing. Her arrest made national headlines. Reporters called it one of the darkest days in Tennessee's history. 4 children gone in a single morning, all at the hands of their own mother. When the case reached court, her defense argued she was too mentally ill to know what she was doing. The state countered that she had been aware enough to choose her actions, to ask that question, to pick up the knife, to lock the door. Judge James Lammy heard the case without a jury. It was a bench trial, quiet but devastating. In December 2021, the court found her guilty on all charges. 4 counts of first-degree murder plus multiple counts of child abuse and neglect. 2 months later, she was sentenced to life in prison for each child. The sentences run together, making her eligible for parole after 51 years. The surviving son now lives with relatives. He still carries the memory of that morning, the question his mother asked, the moment the world changed. He told a counselor once that he prays for his brothers and sisters every night. "God knows their names," he said. For Memphis, the case left a mark no one can erase. Churches across the city held vigils for the children. 4 white balloons rose into the sky that week, one for each life lost. People stood in silence as they drifted upward, tiny shapes disappearing into the clouds. Mental illness is real. It destroys quietly in the shadows of homes that look safe from the outside. But even in that truth, accountability remains. The court decided that Shanynthia Gardner was responsible for her actions, no matter her pain. Justice brought order, but it could never bring back innocence. Sometimes the hardest stories remind us that love alone isn't enough. It needs help, understanding, and faith to survive the storms that people carry inside them. And sometimes when that help doesn't come in time, faith is all that's left. Case 5, Jazmine Jacole Hall, 2021-2024, Athens, Tennessee, late September 2021. A young mother, 27-year-old Jazmine Hall, was locked in a bitter custody fight with her former partner, Hall over their 10-month-old daughter. She told friends she just wanted her baby back. Those who knew her remember her pacing in parking lots, phone in hand, tears in her eyes, saying she was done being pushed around. No one believed it would lead to gunfire. On the evening of September 25th, Jazmine and a friend, Curtis Smith, drove to Riceville. Trevin was inside a small camper with friends, talking, laughing, holding his daughter. It should have been another argument, maybe shouting, maybe tears. Instead, Jazmine walked in, holding a pistol. Witnesses said she pointed it toward the group and shouted for her child. Someone tried to calm her down. The first shot echoed off the thin metal walls. In seconds, the camper became chaos. Screams, more shots, smoke from the gunpowder curling under the ceiling fan. When the noise stopped, 4 people were dead. Trevin Hall, Skylar Horn, Jesse Dyer, and Brandi Harris. 2 others survived only because one jumped through a window and another played dead under a blanket. Curtis Smith then poured gasoline over the floor and lit it. Flames swallowed the camper, while the baby, still in Jazmine's arms, was carried out into the night. The fire department arrived to a blaze that lit the trees orange. Inside, the scene was beyond recognition. For hours, police feared the child had perished too. An Amber Alert went out across the state. Near midnight, officers found Jazmine and Curtis in Polk County. The baby was alive, unharmed, wrapped in a pink blanket. When officers asked why she did it, Jazmine answered quietly, "He wasn't going to take her from me." The investigation was straightforward but horrifying. Ballistic evidence, eyewitness accounts, Jazmine's own admission, everything pointed to her and Curtis. They were charged with 4 counts of murder, arson, and kidnapping. For nearly 3 years, the case moved through the courts. In April 2024, Jazmine accepted a plea deal. She admitted guilt to all counts in exchange for removing the death penalty from consideration. The judge sentenced her to 4 consecutive life terms. Curtis Smith took the same plea soon after. Today, Jazmine sits in a Tennessee prison. She will never walk free again. The child she said she wanted to protect is growing up in the care of relatives, safe, but without her parents. The families of the victims gather every fall in McMinn County to remember their loved ones. They place candles by a memorial bench engraved with 4 names and a single phrase, "Let love lead, not anger." The massacre left a scar on the county. People still struggle to make sense of how a custody fight could end in so much death. But those who lost family say they've stopped asking why. They focus instead on the little girl who survived. A reminder that even when hate burns everything else away, life can still continue. Justice came through sentences, but peace came from community. Neighbors who opened their doors to comfort. Churches that prayed for every soul touched by that fire. And when rain falls over Riceville now, people say it sounds different on metal roofs, softer, as if the land itself is remembering. Case 6, Megan Boswell, 2019-2025, Blountville, Tennessee. December 2019. Megan Boswell was 18 years old, a new mother with a toddler whose smile could melt anyone. Little Evelyn Mae Boswell, bright-eyed, curls of blonde hair dressed in pink most days, was the joy of her grandparents' lives. But behind those family photos, confusion and lies were already weaving through every conversation. By February 2020, no one had seen Evelyn for weeks. When relatives asked where she was, Megan gave an answer that didn't sit right. She said the child's father had her. Later, she changed her story. The baby was with a babysitter. Then she said a friend had taken her for safety. Every time police pressed for details, her story shifted again. Each lie stole precious time. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation issued an Amber Alert. Within hours, national news carried Evelyn's picture. The baby with the tiny bow in her hair, eyes wide with the kind of innocence that stops strangers mid-scroll. Hundreds of volunteers searched fields, rivers, and abandoned lots. Neighbors brought food to officers. Churches opened doors for prayer. People held candles in parking lots, whispering the same words, "Let her be found." Weeks passed. Megan appeared on camera asking for help, saying she missed her daughter. But detectives already doubted her. Her phone data didn't match her timeline. Witnesses contradicted her every claim. By March, hope was wearing thin. Then, during a property search at the Boswell family home, investigators found something hidden in a shed behind a playhouse. Inside was a small trash bag, and within it, Evelyn's body. The discovery ended the search but broke the state's heart. The medical examiner ruled it homicide. The toddler had been dead since December. Megan was arrested first for false reporting, then for murder and child abuse. 19 counts in total. During questioning, she showed little emotion. Detectives said she was calm, almost detached, spinning new versions of her story, even as the evidence grew against her. Her trial began in 2025. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution laid out the timeline. Weeks of lies that had turned a disappearance into a spectacle. Witnesses described the family's confusion, the way Megan misled even her own parents. When jurors saw the photo of the shed where Evelyn was found, several looked away. Megan's defense said she was young, scared, overwhelmed. But the jury saw a mother who had chosen deception over help. In July 2025, they found her guilty of first-degree murder and multiple related charges. Her sentence: life in prison with the possibility of parole after 51 years. For a woman who once stood on television begging for her daughter's return, it was an ending almost too cruel to imagine. Outside the courthouse that day, people left stuffed animals and handwritten notes by a photo of Evelyn. Someone placed a tiny pink bow on the steps. The wind lifted it once, then set it back down. A pastor who joined the search months earlier said quietly, "The truth came too late, but it came." Evelyn's story still circles through Sullivan County like a cold breeze. Parents hold their children closer when they hear her name. Her face remains on posters in stores, not as a missing child now, but as a reminder. She should be starting school this year. Instead, her picture lives on a bulletin board labeled "Justice for Evelyn." Megan Boswell will grow old behind walls, and the community will keep asking why. Why a mother would choose lies over the simple act of telling someone she needed help. No one has found an answer. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe this is one of those tragedies that faith must carry when reason cannot. Case 7. Brenda Behunin, 2022-2025, Sevier County, Tennessee. A place where mountains cradle the horizon, where small churches ring their bells on Sundays and children chase each other through front yards. It was here in late 2022 that a 3-year-old boy was rushed to the emergency room with severe head injuries. His mother, 34-year-old Brenda Behunin, told staff he had fallen. She said she'd found him unresponsive on the floor and brought him as fast as she could. But doctors knew from the moment they saw him that her story didn't fit. The bruises were too deep, the trauma too focused. His skull showed multiple fractures, injuries that couldn't have come from a simple fall. Medical staff did everything they could, but after hours of trying to stabilize him, the child was pronounced dead. When the coroner completed the examination, the truth became official. It wasn't an accident. It was homicide. Detectives questioned Brenda that same day. Her answers shifted again and again. She said he'd slipped in the bathtub. Then she said he fell from a couch. Then that he hit a table while playing. Each version broke under the same facts. The injuries weren't consistent with any of it. Over the following weeks, investigators pieced together a darker pattern. Photos from earlier doctor visits showed signs of older bruises, healing marks on small arms and ribs. Neighbors told police they sometimes heard crying late at night. The evidence pointed to a long history of abuse, hidden behind closed doors. By the end of 2022, Brenda was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and neglect. When she appeared in court, she kept her eyes down. Reporters described her expression as blank, the kind that no one could read. Behind her sat relatives of the little boy, family who once trusted her completely, now holding tissues and framed pictures. It took almost 3 years for the case to reach trial. In 2025, the courtroom filled with parents who couldn't stop thinking of their own children at home. Doctors testified about the extent of the injuries. Their words were clinical but heavy. This child had suffered for some time. Jurors looked at the photos only once. Many couldn't bear to look again. When the verdict came, it was final. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Brenda to life in prison, ensuring she would never harm another child again. There was no applause, no sigh of relief, only a quiet stillness that lingered long after the gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, a woman from a local church handed out candles. She said she didn't know the family, but she couldn't stop thinking about the little boy. Children are meant to be loved loudly, she said. And so that night, dozens of people lit candles in the parking lot, their small flames flickering against the wind. The boy's grave is simple, just a small stone with his first name and a carved heart above it. Visitors sometimes leave toy cars and stuffed animals there. One note left under a flower simply read, "You are safe now." The case changed Sevier County. Local programs were started to help parents under stress, to teach neighbors how to notice early signs of abuse, to make sure silence never hides suffering again. Justice punished the crime, but love from strangers tried to mend what was left. Some say that's how faith works. It doesn't erase the pain, it meets it and refuses to walk away. Case 8, Jessica Chandler, 2024, Sumner County, Tennessee. A quiet morning in 2024. Police were called to a small home on the outskirts of town. The caller's voice was shaking. She said she'd found her daughter's children unresponsive. When officers arrived, the house looked calm from the outside. Inside, 2 small lives were gone. 4-year-old Vista Mae Chandler and her 1-year-old brother Eli James Chandler were found in their beds, each wrapped in the same blanket decorated with blue cartoon characters from Lilo and Stitch. There were no signs of a break-in, no signs of a struggle, just stillness. Their mother, 29-year-old Jessica Chandler, was alive, sitting on the floor by the doorway, whispering that she was sorry. Detectives read her notes later, pages written in shaky handwriting. In them, Jessica explained that she had planned to end her life and take her children with her. convinced they were better off safe in heaven than facing a world she could no longer handle. She wrote about exhaustion, loneliness, and nights of silence where she prayed but heard nothing back. She survived her own attempt, waking up to what she had done. The officers who entered that day said the sight would never leave them. A nursery that should have been full of laughter had become a place of unthinkable quiet. The blanket, a symbol of comfort, had been turned into something else entirely. Jessica was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of child abuse. Her case spread quickly through the community. People who had known her at church said she'd always been kind, patient with her children, never angry. Her friends could only repeat one word: why? As the investigation continued, mental health professionals were called in. Reports suggested Jessica had been struggling for months. Postpartum depression, isolation, financial stress, no family nearby. But even those details could not soften the loss. 2 children, innocent and trusting, gone in one night. Her case is still awaiting trial. If convicted, she faces life in prison. Her defense has indicated they will present evidence of mental illness, arguing that she wasn't in her right mind when she acted. The court will decide what mercy, if any, looks like under the law. For the community, the conversation has shifted from anger to prevention. Churches now host family counseling nights. Volunteers visit single parents to check in, bringing food and offering company. People learned something from this tragedy: that sometimes the most dangerous thing a parent can carry is silence. On a spring morning the following year, neighbors gathered in front of Jessica's home. They placed stuffed animals and flowers on the steps, each tied with a small ribbon. Someone played a hymn quietly on a phone, and when it ended, they let the silence sit. No speeches, no cameras, just a few people standing together, honoring the memory of 2 children who should have grown up. Faith tells us that light survives darkness, that even after despair, compassion can rebuild what's broken. Jessica Chandler's story isn't only about loss. It's about what her town chose to do afterward, to reach out, to listen, to make sure no parent ever feels alone again. Case 9, Cynthia Collier, 2018, Columbia, Tennessee, October 15, 2018. Family members couldn't reach 55-year-old Cynthia Collier that morning. She wasn't answering texts, and her car hadn't moved from the driveway. At first, they told themselves she might be resting. But after hours passed with no word, they called police to check on her. Officers arrived at a tidy brick home on a quiet street. A mailbox full of unopened letters, curtains drawn. When no one answered the door, they stepped inside. The house was silent, too still for a family of 5. They found Cynthia in her bedroom. She had taken her own life with a gun. But the horror did not end there. In separate bedrooms, her 4 adopted teenage children were dead as well, each shot multiple times while they slept. The officers who entered that home would later describe the moment as one they could never forget. Framed family photos on the walls, school trophies, a Bible open on a nightstand, and 4 young lives ended in an instant. The children were between 14 and 17 years old. They had come from overseas years earlier, each adopted into the Collier family with the promise of safety and love. Cynthia had been a respected woman in her church. She volunteered, cooked for community events, and was known for kindness. She'd spoken often about how grateful she was to have her children. No one saw a warning. No note was left behind. No explanation. Just silence. Investigators searched every room, hoping for a clue. They found groceries still in the bags, a laundry machine running, half-finished chores that made the house look frozen midday. There was no evidence of struggle. The children likely never woke up. It was ruled a murder-suicide. Neighbors and church members were left stunned. They'd seen her just days earlier, smiling in the pews. Her pastor said she always volunteered to help others, even when she looked tired herself. To this day, no one knows what pain pushed her to that decision. Schools held vigils for the children. Students lit candles, and their teachers read short tributes, simple words about kindness, laughter, and dreams that would never be lived. The funerals were held together, 4 small caskets side by side. At the service, one person said they came from different countries, but they left this world as a family. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The Collier case shook the entire community. It forced difficult questions about mental health, isolation, and the hidden burdens people carry even when they look fine. Police later confirmed there was no financial crisis, no sign of abuse, nothing obvious that could explain it. Sometimes tragedy leaves only unanswered questions. For those who knew Cynthia, her story remains impossible to categorize. She was both a mother who gave children a home and the one who took that home away. Faith leaders in Colombia still mention her case in sermons about compassion and watchfulness. They remind congregations that love is not just a feeling. It's an action that sometimes means asking, "Are you okay?" and meaning it. Every year on October 15th, local churches ring their bells 5 times, one for Cynthia and one for each of her children. It's a reminder that silence can hide the deepest storms, and that paying attention might one day save a life. 9 stories, 9 mothers, 9 moments when the meaning of love was twisted into something unrecognizable. Tennessee remembers them not for what they took, but for what they teach us. The fragile line between care and cruelty, between faith and despair. Each of these stories began the same way: an ordinary morning, a family going about their lives. None of them thought the day would end in tragedy. Yet each one reminds us that evil isn't always a stranger. It can live behind a familiar door, wear a familiar smile, speak with a gentle voice. But if these cases break our hearts, they also call us to something higher: awareness, compassion, faith. For every act of harm, there were neighbors who prayed, officers who refused to give up, communities that gathered with candles instead of hatred. The darkness did not win, not fully because the people left behind refused to forget. Tonight, as the lights dim, remember Rockland and Leland Bates, the twin sons of Lindsey Lowe, Piper Elliott, the 4 Gardner children, Trevin and the victims of Riceville, little Evelyn Boswell, the unnamed boy from Sevier County, Emma and Noah Chandler, and the 4 Collier teenagers. 9 cases, 17 children, each one deserving of more years than they were given. Faith tells us that even the smallest light can reach through the longest night. And maybe that's why these stories must be told. Not to reopen wounds, but to make sure we never stop caring. If one person sees a warning sign, makes a call, or offers help because of them, then their names carry meaning beyond the tragedy. If stories like this remind you how fragile trust can be, share this video so their memory lives on. Subscribe to True Crime Exposed for more true stories that search for truth and grace in the shadows. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, even in the darkest night, light still finds a way home.